Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Clinton Senior Center, where we continue with our Caregivers series, along with our Outreach Program Coordinator, Donna Joyce Baird. And our special guest today is John McNally, who is a Clintonian here, whose wife has Alzheimer's disease. His wife started with early onset, and John's going to talk to us a little bit about that and his journey from the beginning, when it started, the thoughts, the feelings, the process, and how it continued on to where they are today. So, John, thank you for sharing with us your experience.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Debbie and Donna asked me to come up and speak a little bit about what I've experienced over the years. My wife is now 66 and in a nursing home, but it didn't start that way, obviously. About 11 years ago, roughly, she started showing signs of forgetfulness, misplacing things. She was getting upset with herself at the time. She says, I know I did this, but I can't remember where I put this or where I left my keys. So we all have that type of forgetfulness at times, and we try to deal with it as best we can. But then it progressively got worse, and she was questioning what was going on with her. So she went to her doctor, her regular doctor, and she gave her some different types of medications to try to deal with what possibly could be causing this type of forgetfulness and lack of focus, if you will. But again, it was very mild at the beginning. And they found out doing some blood work that she was deficient in vitamin B12 and D3. And many of us, as we get older, we're deficient in our vitamins, but those particular two vitamins are very involved with the cognitive ability of our brain. So they immediately started giving her some of that, hoping that would make a difference. Well, it helped a little bit, but it really wasn't the main cause of what was going on with her, as we found out. And then another year and a half went by, and she was getting worse, and we went in for testing, different types of people who review this type of condition, and they gave her some tests, and they said the tests looked funny, as far as a written test, and then talking to her. And then they went and did they did a dye test, CAT scan, and that's when they started really seeing some differences in her brain waves. And so at that point, we started worrying about how we were going to deal with that. And they tried some more psycho drugs, if you will. It was a psychopharmacologist that we went to, and those drugs really didn't help at all, but they thought it might. And as far as her behavior goes, I used to take her to church, and I happened to notice certain things that were more disconcerting at that time, and that would be when the music played in church. She would get very upset with the music, and she couldn't understand why. Sometimes when we went up to receive communion, she would get nervous or upset, and then she would not know where to go back to her seat. And then it got to a point where I finally had to stop taking her to church because she couldn't do it anymore. And about that same time, she was still driving, and she got lost a couple times. We had to just stop her from driving because she'd be driving, and all of a sudden she just ended up 2 towns away. And this is local driving. So at that point, it was really starting to wear on her too, because she knew something was wrong, and she couldn't really figure out what was going on. I would notice that in the house, she would just kind of walk around and walk around. She'd sometimes just sit in her chair for long hours and chew on her cuticles, and I'd put the TV on, and I don't know if she was really watching or not. There was a disconnect with how she reacted to things that were going on in the house. And about that time, I found out about the Summit Elder Care program. It's a program that's in Worcester County. I guess, from what I understand, it's one of the few in the state that they have for this type of situation. And so they would send her to like a day program, an adult day health program, and excuse me, they would put her on a bus in the morning, and then she would be taken up there, and I'd go to work, and then at night. So I knew all during the day that she was somewhere safe, you know. And then the Summit program also allowed me to have someone to come in to take her off the bus, because I used to work near Boston and I didn't get home till 6 or later many nights. And so at least I knew she was safe, you know. And then a couple times I tried to take her in the warmer weather. I tried to take her. I took her up to the beach once, and I thought maybe walking along the beach, just the two of us, it would be helpful. She would maybe relax and be able to enjoy it, but it was very tough for her. She got scared, and I brought her in the water just to walk, and she used to love to do that, and she just totally wanted nothing to do with it anymore. So I didn't try that again. So this time now she can't drive anymore. She's on other medications. She is going to daycare. And then it progressed to a point where I had to take more of her personal care under my wings, because even though the women came in the morning for an hour and in the afternoon for a couple hours, when I was home with her, like on the weekends, there was just her and I. Our children are all grown and moved out of the house. So in the beginning, it wasn't too bad. She would let me help her. But then after several years of that, it progressed to, it was like a fighting, you know. And I understood that maybe it was because she was losing her personal ability to take care of herself, that it was upsetting to her. And so you can imagine that, you know, showering and toileting could be difficult. It was difficult for me, you know. I didn't mind taking care of a child that way, but when you have to take care of an adult, it was a real upsetting at times to me, and I would lose my cool. There's a friend of mine over here in the audience that knows my temper. But it wasn't so much as losing my temper, it was losing the fact that I couldn't do what I needed to do to help her. And I'd get mad sometimes and just, you know, yell out because I couldn't do it. And so approximately 5 or 6 years ago, it started getting really bad, worse even. And a couple times when I was out in the yard, she left the house, and one of the little girls across the street said, "Hey, John, I just saw your wife going down the..." And I went running out, and she was already down and around the corner. So I went to the police station, and while I was at the police station saying my wife's missing, we looked out the window, and there she was walking around Central Park. So luckily that worked out all right, but that was the kind of thing that I couldn't be confident in, that if someone wasn't there, that she wouldn't just open the door and just leave. And that got to be really problematic. And then about 4.5 years ago, it really got to the point where she was still eating. I would make the meals, and I didn't let the people do the meals. They took care of her other needs, but I used to cook the meals when I got home, so we'd eat together. You know, there wasn't much conversation. She couldn't really communicate even at that point too much to me. I'd ask her a few questions, and she would answer me in short responses, and you know, it was something, but at least I got her to eat, and I felt good about that fact that she was eating. And then that would have been, let's see, well, like I said, 4.5 years ago. And then the whole toileting, showering thing just completely broke down. She would not let me help her do anything like that. So when the ladies weren't there to help me, I was just really totally frustrated. I couldn't take care of her, and she wouldn't let me take care of her. And at that point, the Summit program, I went up there and I spoke to them further, and they said, "Yeah, you've done a good job for about 7 years now. We're staying at home," and I enjoyed doing that. But they said it's probably time to get her into a place where she can have 24/7 care. And we looked around at some of the places, my daughters and I, and my son wasn't living around here at the time. And we found the Highlands up in Fitchburg, and we found that place was really, it was really a well set up place. It seemed to be well run. It was fairly clean, as those type of places can be. Not so clean in some cases, but The people really seemed to care about what they were doing up there. And during this time frame, before she went in, I had gone to several Alzheimer meetings. I wanted to add that to this talk too. I went to the Alzheimer's Association meeting in Watertown with a woman friend of mine whose sister was going through it. So we went there, and there were some good, inspirational speakers there, a doctor and then a counselor and a few other people. But then they have regular meetings for people that sometimes find that that's a lot more helpful to them than one-on-one, being in a group. And I went to a couple meetings up at the Summit program for Caregivers information. And some of it was good. I used some of it. But again, it wasn't really, for me, it wasn't what I wanted or what I think I needed. I also get regular information from the Alzheimer's Association. They send out regular bulletins about research that's going on. They give information on not only research that's going on, but treatments that are possibly coming about. Some of the things that have come out, again, I'm no expert on this, believe me, but I'm just telling you some of the things I've heard. One, they're looking at whether there's a genetic factor to it, whether it was inherited. Her mother and father didn't have anything like this to the, maybe a little bit of, maybe some little dementia starting, but her father was in his 80s before we saw signs of that. Valerie was only 55 or so. So her onset was much younger and much more unexpected. Some of the other research they're looking into, there's some places where there are groups or small populations of people that don't seem to have any of this problem. And I went to a meeting at the Marriott in Newton, and there must have been 300 people there. That's probably about 5 years ago. And they were looking for people who were willing to volunteer to participate in these programs. So there are some things like that out there that if you're interested in, you can maybe Google that stuff. And I can't think of the name of the program, but it was a program where they were going to follow people for a set period of time, and maybe some people would get a placebo and some people would get an actual drug of some other type of, drug of something. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but a lot of people seemed interested in it, and I haven't heard anything about it since. But again, just about 4 years ago, Christmas, it got to the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I wasn't effective, and I was losing my cool. I couldn't deal with it, because she wouldn't let me do it. When you want to help somebody, but they fight you, and I know why she was fighting me. She doesn't understand. But that doesn't make it any better. If I can't be effective, I wasn't doing her any good. So at that point, the Summit people had her admitted to the Highlands, which is where she's at now, and she's been there for just a little over 4 years. And I visit her as much as I can, and I went back to work part-time here in town. And my children have had an awful time with it. They have said to me basically, Dad, we can't go up too much because that's not our mother. That's the way they had to deal with it, because they couldn't stand to see her that way. And it took me some time to get used to that, because I was looking at it from my point of view and not theirs. And so, we didn't have a big problem with it as far as us arguing or anything, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't go up more. But then I came to understand. It really did. It finally sunk in. I didn't want them to be hurt any more than they had been. So they don't really go up as much, and it's because they can't stand to see her that way. And I had to accept that, and I had to understand that. And I have come to that point. And now she's in the advanced stages of this, where she can't walk anymore. She's in a wheelchair, or she's in her bed. That's it. She still eats, but I say at this point in her life, it's probably the one benefit that she can still enjoy is that she eats. Because she can't, we got her a radio, we bring her flowers, we bring her things, but she doesn't even look at them. She doesn't know to look at them. Television is worthless. They have TV up there, but she's not able to accept and understand what it is, obviously. And everybody asks me this question every time I talk about this. People will say, do you think she knows you? And I say, I don't know. And that's the truth. I don't know. But I proceed with the idea that I think she does recognize me because I get right in her face and I make sure she looks at me. So I'm not just talking, to the side of her head or to nobody, And her reaction is when I get to that point and her eyes are fully open, she either giggles or she'll cry, which to me is a sign that she recognizes me. And either she's upset about something and wants to say something and she can't, or it's just the fact that she recognizes that I'm there. And so that's my interpretation. And I mean, of course, we've been married now for almost 46 years. And so if I've learned anything about her, I think I can kind of read her reactions. I hope I'm right. And I think that's the reaction that I'm probably going to get from most of the time when I'm up there. As to what the prognosis is, well, as more and more of her functions are not good, they're not working for her, the last thing is probably her eating ability, her ability to enjoy eating and eating for nourishment and for her strength. And so I hopefully that'll continue to some point, but then again, people say to me, well, what about her quality of life? And that's a good question that I can't answer. I mean, who knows what's going through her head? What is she recognizing? What is she understanding? There's no real way of telling. And even the nurses and the aides up there, they don't know. They have more experience, obviously, because they deal with many, many patients up there. There's a whole floor up there designated just for this purpose. The third floor up there is all Alzheimer dementia patients, and that's how they deal with it. But, she's in a good place. She's being taken care of, but I don't know. I mean, what kind of a life is that? Everybody asks me. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know how to answer it. It's very upsetting to see someone that's so close to you go downhill like that. And it's like I said, this is we're going on almost 11 years now where it's been, and the last 5 or 6 have been really tough. Before that, it was minor stuff, and she was still mobile, and but as it progresses, it takes more and more away of your functions, I know she can't focus a lot. That's why I have to get in front of her and try to get her to look at me, because her eyes, she just doesn't focus. And, well, it's really, we never really know what to expect, do we? What does the future hold? We don't know. But whenever I've asked for help for certain people, the Summit program has been pretty good. They offer us counseling and help, and they're responsible now, even though she's in this place, she's still in their program, the Summit PACE program. So she's still in this program. And they not only do they have nurses up there on the floor, the Summit program sends a nurse or the doctor up once a week to check on her too. So they've got other eyes on her besides just those who work up there. And I watch, when I'm up there, I watch how they take care of everybody, because when I'm there, obviously you think, well, they're going to be very careful with her, but I watch what they do with everybody up there. I watch how they feed them and how they take care of them and how they respond to their needs. And it's not an easy job. Those ladies all deserve medals as far as I'm concerned. And it's a few guys that work up there too. But for what they have to do day in and day out, the people yelling, help me, help me, help me. I mean, I've been up there for an hour, and there's one lady that says that for the whole hour I'm there. So can you imagine how that wears on those people that are working in that facility? Or people screaming, leave me alone. I mean, don't touch me. Anything you can imagine, screaming, because they're in another world. They're not in their own, they're in their own reality, I guess is what I would say. So it must be very difficult to deal with that. And sometimes I have to take her, my wife, and go to another part, which you can. They got other little places you can go just to get away from that cacophony of noise in there, so I've done that. And we brought the grandchildren up to see her. That was difficult because the little ones, they're only 6, 4, and 2, and they didn't know they just knew it was Nana, but they, why can't Nana talk to me, or why can't Nana say something? And that is probably as heartrending as anything, because my wife, we did foster care for 7 or 8 years, and about 7 years, and we took in all kinds of children from everywhere, they're mostly infants, but for her not to be able to enjoy her own grandchildren, that's a real tough one, because I know, she'd do anything for them, so I try to keep that in mind when they're with me, that if she was here, she'd want me to do whatever it is I can do for them. So here I am almost 11 years later, and we're planning a family meeting up there probably the mid next month, just to see what the prognosis is going forward. So if you were dealing with this in your home or a close family member, one of the things I would say to you is that try to remember that they just are in a total different place. What you and I take for granted, they don't really know what's going on, and you can see it in their face. You can see it. And so, especially if someone like me who has the patience of, I don't know what, none. Yeah, quiet O'Brien.
You come a long way, believe me.
Maybe this is the good Lord's way of telling me, hey, John, you got to learn humility and patience, and but I really tried to do what I could. And then, like I said, when she started fighting me, I couldn't be effective anymore. I could not. If someone's not going to let you help them, you can't force it. So that's when I knew, because everybody in the family was saying, John, it's time to go. And I said, no, it isn't. I'll know when it is. I'll know when it's time. I know I will. And I kept putting it off, and finally, when I reached that point I was telling you about, that last couple months before she actually went in, I just knew. And then I called, and they did it. They did it almost within a few weeks. They had it squared away, and they brought her right up there for me. Yes?
How long from the time you discovered she had Alzheimer's, I'm sorry, Emily, until it was time?
Oh, I'd say a good 7 years.
Some people go faster.
Everybody's different.
Definitely.
Everybody's different. She had what they call early onset, meaning she got it younger, and it's usually a slower progressing disease, and it's drawn out longer. The usual dementia or late onset Alzheimer's, to my knowledge, from what they've told me, is a shorter duration, usually, not always. There's no hard and fast that runs like this. It depends on the individual. It depends on what it is that's going on. A lot of these illnesses are similar, but they're not all exactly the same from what they're telling us. And these newsletters I get from the Alzheimer's Association, I'm sure they're online too. Alzheimer's Association, and Donna might even have that information for you. They're in Watertown, so they're local. That's fairly local as far as I'm concerned, but excuse me, they, of course, they're always looking for donations, but they always send me a newsletter too. And some of that newsletter is they go into the research and where they're at and where they think things are going. There's that research program. You weren't in the room, ma'am, at the time. There's a group of doctors that are trying to look at a certain population of individuals. I don't know if it was an island or a peninsula somewhere, where this group hasn't shown any signs of any dementia, Alzheimer, anything. And every other nationality and country is seeing it. But this one, so they're really interested in what's going on here. Is it what they eat? Is it their environment? Is it what the chemicals are exposed to? Is it genetic? So there's some really good research going on out there. And so I always make sure I read these things. They're very interesting.
Do they have a test to diagnose it now? A definitive test before this, after they pass? But.
Yeah. There's some things that they can tell you, but I don't think it's definitive.
No.
I think there's some little written tests that I've seen them use. And I guess there's some ways to tell where you're at with that. But that doesn't mean you have Alzheimer's if you don't do well. It just means that you're starting to have trouble, focusing and discerning normal functions, if you will, that we all perform most days. But besides that, she had a CAT scan with a dye done, and they can tell from that whether there was some, where the neurons in the
Yeah, different colors up there, yeah.
So they did that to her that's a good 7 years ago, I'd say. And they did that at the MRI place on Shrewsbury Street in Worcester. And so, one doctor in another location, they sent me down to St. Elizabeth's with her one day. They were, in some of us, well, we're all a little bit older than most people here. I mean, than the kids out there. You remember when they used to talk about electric shock treatment? Mm-hmm. There are still some doctors that feel that this is helpful to stimulate the brain. Now, I went and I talked to this guy, and my wife was with me, and he was recommended by some doctors that said he was big into this type of treatment. But the thing, I asked him a lot of questions, but one of the main questions I asked him was, well, if it doesn't work, can it do any damage? And he looked at me and go, well, she could come out of it worse. And I said, forget it. Forget it. I'm not experimenting with my wife's brain. Forget it. No way. See ya. So he kind of just shuffled it off. He said, okay, well, if you change your mind, give me a call. But there are people still doing that. And he was at St. Elizabeth's in Brighton. So there are a lot of people that are trying to experiment with treatments, but they still have to, I think it's like any other disease, I think they still have to find out exactly what the main cause is, And I think once they get that a good grasp on that, treatments will be better and more forthcoming. That would be what I would suspect. So I think I'll kind of stop there now and see if there's some more specific things that I can answer for you, that if you have specific questions.
Was she on any medications in the early onset? Because now they're giving people...
She was on Namenda and Aricept.
Together.
And she was on that for a long time. Mm-hmm. And the last 6 months, her doctor, who was part of the Summit program, said to me, at this point, I don't think it's doing any good. It's because that's to slow it down. It doesn't
cure it.
No, exactly. And that's what's always been said about that. In fact, they're working on there's a stronger Aricept out there, Aricept 23, there's a number to it, which supposedly was stronger. But again, that's usually for early to mid. Mm-hmm. And so they took her off it. They took her off the Namenda too. And quite honestly, I didn't see any big change in her. I didn't see any change. She said, why do we have to keep giving her this stuff? So her meds have actually gone down. Right now, they're treating her more for pain. They think she's got arthritis. And some of it may be due to the fact that she's like this all day long. She doesn't move. She only moves one hand. She doesn't move her legs. She sometimes moves the other arm, but...
Is she bedridden?
Yeah. Bedridden to the wheelchair, to the bed. We had her walking. For the first 2 years she was up there, she was walking. But then just stopped. And her brother and I actually picked her up one day, and to try to see if we could get her to walk. She curled her legs up like in a fetal position, would not put her legs down. And we were walking around and she's got her legs up. And I says, honey, come on, try to put your feet down, try to put your legs down so you can walk. Because I knew once you stop walking, and getting some exercise, I figured this isn't good. I wanted to keep her moving if I could.
Did she not want to walk, or couldn't she walk?
Don't know. Is that a natural progression of this disease?
They said it was.
Mobility?
They said it was, yes. Yeah.
How did you manage, before she went in to the institution, how did you manage days with her, or was there someone watching?
Yes, you had come in after I had touched on that. She's in now and was in then the Summit Elder Care Program.
Okay.
I found out about it. Their office is actually, well, they have several. They have one in Worcester, maybe two in Worcester and one in Leominster. And they're right up behind the on Cinema Boulevard, up behind the Leominster Cinemas there, you know, up where Demoulas.
I'm familiar with
Okay, well, so it was close, and that's where they have their day program. So when she was able to, she would still, they'd pick her up in the morning and bring her up there, and I could go to work, because I worked near Boston at the time. And it was a whole full day program, and then she'd come home, and the Summit people also had personal care attendants to come and take her off the bus and give her a shower, or, you know, even feed her if I wanted to until I got home. So they were very good about giving me time in the morning and in the afternoon to help me so I could get to work. I was late every day for work anyways, but that doesn't matter. But
Did she like it? I mean, did she fight you?
Not then,
Getting
no.
on the bus or anything?
oh, once in a while she said, I don't want to go today. And I said, well, honey, you have to go. You know, and you know, there's friends up there, and they have music, and they have a meal, and
The distractions for them.
yeah.
Their minds.
Yes.
Brains busy.
Yeah, but most of the time she'd go on this, even when she didn't want to, she would go fairly placidly. She wouldn't fight me on that. And then it was mostly the women putting her on the bus anyways, you know, the personal care people. I was on my way to Boston, so.
Is that Summit program, is that all private pay, or is that like an agency?
Their main funding, I believe, comes through Mass Health.
Oh, it does, okay.
So, you know, your finances are a big part of this, and
Based on your income, I imagine.
it is. So right now, yeah, she's got a retirement from where she used to work, and they take most of it, you know. But Mass Health is a big provider of this type of care. Excuse me, and I would invite, and I don't know how you know, right now, I haven't asked, because I've been in the program so long, I don't know what the application things are for right now. But certainly, you may want to ask about how that program, there are several people up there that are really good about talking to people about the family situations with this. But it's called, it's part of, there's a lot of names involved. It's part of the Fallon program, but it's Summit Elder Care PACE, P-A-C-E, PACE program.
Did you mention a while ago it took 3 months from the time you applied? Did you say that?
No, what, to get her, when I said it's time for her to go in?
Right.
No, it didn't take that long.
No, for her to be accepted once you applied.
Well, there had to be an opening. If there's no bed, then, so they were talking, there was a couple places in Worcester which I didn't like, and I'd been up there a couple times to check it out, and I liked what I saw up there. It just, you know, when you go into a place and just the way the people talk to you, the way the people react to you, you can tell. And the cleanliness of the place, the way it was laid out, you get a sense of whether you like this place or not, you know. And out of all the ones I saw, I immediately liked that one. And my daughters did too. And my daughters are much more astute than I am as picking out, you know, quality when they see it. So they agreed with me that this was where we wanted it to go. So some of that waiting period was a little bit of making sure there was a bed available. And once there was, they put it right in. So it wasn't, I'd say it was probably a couple months maybe by the time I had said, no, not at all, not at all.
Because they must have a waiting list.
Oh, I would say, because they're full now.
Yeah.
They're full up there, whenever I go to see her. Paul?
The self-care thing up there, is that every day during the week, 5 days a week?
Yeah.
Or is it just as many days as you want it?
No, it's, well, yeah, you could do it that way if you want too. But it's, yeah, I think you can go 1 day or you can go 5. It's not on the weekends, so
It'd be Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday it's available, and they pick you up. You're picked up and brought up there, and so transportation isn't an issue. If you get in the program, it's good.
Yeah. No, I'm a little familiar with it because your friend Mark's mother was.
Yeah, Irene, yeah, she was in there. Yep.
Did your wife forget who your children were? Is it kind of early or middle stage of this
You know, again, that's very hard
to tell?
to tell. In the beginning, no, she knew who they were. But as more time went by, when they'd come over the house, they would talk to her, and you couldn't, it was hard for them to tell. It was hard for them to not have their mother be able to talk to them. And, you know, that's, you know, if someone breaks a leg and you go over to help them, and, you know, you can talk and you can console them, but how do you console somebody that you're not sure they even know you're there? They might know you're there, but you won't always know that they know it. Their response to you will vary, and you won't always be able to know, depending on what stage they're at, I would say.
The disease is worse for the care people than it is for the patient itself.
Well, yeah, that's another thing that's a common thing people say and ask if they're not sure. You could say, well, I know what's going on and I can see what it's doing to her and she doesn't. But to some degree, you got to think that they know something's wrong and something's going on with themselves because they can't do what they always did before. So I would think that, who knows? Again, they're locked in their own world and they can't communicate it.
It's so sad to think that they know, and yet...
Well, you ask any of the nurses or ask even the doctors, they'll tell you, you don't know what they're thinking or what they can hear. Some people come in and talk in front of people because they're like this, and you don't think they're you don't know if they can hear you or not. You don't know. And so, I know I've been up there with her in the day room and we're feeding, and there's maybe 15 or 14 people in there, and there's things going on. The nurses, the personal care attendants are walking around, and I'll say something to one of the nurses who I know them all pretty well by now, and some of the patients I know. And I kid with them sometimes because some of the ladies are like 25, 30 years older than my wife, and they're still talking, but they're not talking sense, but you can kid with them. One of the lady over there, I love her. She's only about this big, and she sits on it. She says, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. Get me out of here, get me, And I'd say, I'd love to get you out of here, but I'll get arrested if I, just things like that, just to get a smile, or sometimes they just don't even know what you're saying, but that's what the nurses do with them. They kid with them. Where's my son? He's supposed to pick me up. He's coming, Judy. He's coming in 10 minutes. He'll be right here. And then 5 minutes later, she's asking again. And he's coming. He's just parking the car. So they've cultured these ways to deflect this constant asking, same things over and over again, and trying to allay their fears, And because some of them will start screaming or crying, and because they don't know what's going on,
Are they mostly, those that are there, are they mostly Alzheimer's patients?
On this floor, the floor she's on, yes.
On that floor?
The other floors, there's 5 floors. I think the first floor is all offices and treatment centers. And then the 3rd floor is Alzheimer dementia patients. The other floors are just regular nursing care. So depending on what level you're at. So the 2nd, 4th, and 5th floors, I think, are depending on what you're there for. Some are rehab.
It's a nursing.
Yes, it is, yeah. Yeah.
Because I visited someone up there for the rehab.
Just for the rehab, right. And I know some,
Just like any other.
yeah, and there's people that we probably all know that have been there for rehab.
Yep.
And they're good at it, so they use it for that too. But this 3rd floor is you gotta get a code to get off the floor. And of course they don't know what the code is. So if you don't know the code, you can come up to the floor, but then to get off again, you got to press the code in or you can't leave. So they do have that so that they just can't wander off, And the doors are alarmed.
Did you have were there any other members of her family that?
I touched on that a little bit. Her mother, no. Her mother had a lot of other health issues, and she was one of the loveliest ladies I've ever known. She had a lot of health issues. She was on dialysis, and she had some other issues with health. But she seemed to still be pretty cognizant. But she died fairly young too. She was only in her mid-70s when she passed away. Her father was starting to be a little off. In fact, he stayed in this building for a while. Remember when it was nursing care for a while here? He actually stayed here for a little while. He died about at 85, but nothing like what she's got. Nothing.
It was probably just natural,
Yeah. It was old age.
age-related, or, yeah.
Well, it's some sort of dementia or,
I used to see him down the end, he's eating by himself.
yeah,
Now,
yeah. So as far as the DNA we have, can they tell by that? Some people are more prone, some families seem to have more of it in a row, but I think they think it's more than just that. There's one of the things I read, we know there's type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. This one researcher is something, he's calling it type 3 diabetes, which the sugar, if we, the too much sugar, and it affects the brain function. So here's another reason not to eat so much sugar, according to this guy. Now, will that turn out to be a major factor? It might, but that's in one of the Alzheimer Association newsletters that I was reading about that. You know, and then there's this study I told you about 4 or 5 years ago that I listened to, that these doctors are, I wish I could remember the name of it for you. I'm sorry, I can't. But they're looking at this certain population and why they don't have any issues with this whatsoever. But every other, just about anywhere else you go in the world, doesn't matter your nationality or your...
But wasn't this group of people, weren't they like isolated from?
Yes.
You know, as
Yeah,
far as
I'm not going to call it a tribe. I'm going to call it a group, a clan, or they were, and I'm trying to remember where it was. Speaking of forgetting, I'm sorry, I can't remember. I'm not sure it was even an island. It was just a group that were somewhat reclusive. They weren't totally reclusive, but they weren't a general part of like a big city or a big population. They were a smaller group of people, and they all were pretty well related. And you know, so I don't know whatever happened with that. That was several years back that they were looking at that population, and why is it so they don't see any? Is it their diet? Is it where they live? Is it, you know, is it something in their DNA? Who knows?
I know there's a lot of documentation that people with untreated hearing loss and sleep apnea is a direct cause of memory loss.
They're saying more and more of that, and I'm starting to lose mine too. I get ringing in the ears and everything else. Untreated. Well, you know, I said, yeah, because they think it's the disassociation from normal interactivity with people, that if you don't hear or you're not picking up the meanings of things, that, there's research into that too. Is it proven? I don't think it's proven yet, but they...
Well, it is. I just came back from a conference with a neuroscientist.
And he said it was definite?
They gave us several studies that absolutely proved this is the hearing loss.
Yes, no, I know what you're talking about, right?
If it's left untreated, then it has caused a lot of memory loss in people. And the same with sleep apnea.
Yeah,
There's a lot of documentation.
Yeah, well, yeah, because you're starving the oxygen to the brain,
exactly,
so that can affect, yeah.
It's a terrible thing.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, it may turn out to be like some other diseases where there's multiple causes for this,
Sure.
but, yeah, I think,
Yeah, you know, you were saying, like, when you went in to see her and everything, that sometimes she may giggle and sometimes she may cry. You think, the giggle was the fact that she was able to, you saw you there,
could be.
You know, and crying is maybe because she figured you hadn't been there a long time, or, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you end up interpreting it not
Hopefully the way.
Yeah, you don't know what she's really thinking.
Yeah.
She can't talk. And yet some of these people who are much, much, much older than her, they can talk, but some of the stuff doesn't make any sense, but they're saying words. She mumbles. I mean...
But isn't the early onset of this really more troubling and difficult than someone who gets it later on? I mean,
well, I guess, ma'am,
symptoms and everything?
I guess it depends on how you're looking at it and who's looking at it and how they take it.
I would think those who get it younger would be stronger physically.
And maybe that's why it takes longer. Yeah, it could be. But again, as I mentioned, you weren't here. Especially women, they told me to watch for your B12 and your vitamin D3. Those two vitamins have a lot to do with our cognitive ability. But women tend to be lower in it than men.
For some reason.
So that's maybe why more women tend to get this than men do. But
There are more women than men?
yeah, I think it's like 3-to-1 or something.
Ooh. That's right.
That's, yeah. But I know this one woman I used to work with, she has her own company, and she was starting to get worried, and she knew what was going on with my wife, and she called me aside one day. And she's younger than we are. And she said to me, what did you tell, did you check into this? She was getting worried about herself. She says, I'm forgetting so much, I can't I said to her, I said, well, Lisa, you got a lot on your plate. You run your own business, you're doing consulting. But she said, no, it's more than that, it's more than that. Well, she went, she saw me maybe a month later, and she said to me, thank you. And I said, what? She says, I went and had my B12 and my D3, and I was low in both of them. And she said, the doctor put me right on it, and she says, I feel so much better.
Oh, my gosh.
So there's a case where it proved to be true. Okay, so. So, I have another meeting to go to. But is there any other, I don't want to just walk out on you. If there's any other particular things that, I'd advise you to, either call or Google the Alzheimer's Association. They're in Watertown, and there's a New Hampshire chapter. I think there's one up there, but the closest one I know of is in Watertown, Mass. And they can give you more information.
And they sponsor a lot of workshops around the area too.
As far as I know, they do, yeah. And this newsletter is nice. I like that. I don't know, maybe when I'm done with it, I should bring it up here and let you guys have it instead.
That'd be wonderful.
I should do that instead of just throwing them away.
That'd be great, John.
Yeah, I can do that.
And we can share on our Facebook page as well.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope none of you will ever have to go through this. Unfortunately, you never know,
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Okay. I've known Debbie a long time, and it's okay if I get a hug. I know.
I just wanted
Little
to
bit.
mention that the Clinton Police Department, we have a form that you can fill out